Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name's Stacy. So, I've been watching, true crime because that's what I watch along with the news. And I've been, thinking over the Koberger plea because I'm a very logical and reasonable person. And my initial reaction of the shock of that coming so close to trial, and I know that a lot of cases plea out as it gets close to trial. They wanted me to plea in my case, and the prosecutor kept going to my attorney. My attorney said she is not taking a plea. And actually, when the jury hung in my case, my prosecutor's like, are we doing this again? Or my defense attorney said to the prosecutor, are we doing this a third time? You want to do this again? And that trial, I know they had to pay the prosecutor and my defense attorney each $5,000 just for that day. So how much did it cost the court to prosecute me? Because they had to tie up court time and the judge. And there was no investigation. The officer that got on the stand, the detective, was like, oh, well, I don't know anything about this case. It was just given to me. So you're going to take the stand and say that? Like, you know nothing about the case. You didn't interview anyone. You didn't read the case, because they didn't interview anyone. No one. They took the statement from the girl's mother, who forced the girl to lie. And, she was a minor. She was scared to death of her mother. Her mother had her arrested a month prior, and she spent 5 or 6 days in jail, being held, and they sent her to juvie for a few. Like, her mother is a flaming witch. So, people do things for different reasons, and I know that that pressure coming down a trial is like a freight train coming down on you, and I was only looking at 90 days, but it was the inconvenience. I was working full-time, so it was the expense, what was going to happen to my bills. Like, I couldn't pay them if I was in jail. Like, I mean, there were real world consequences to taking that to trial and losing. I was facing a fine up to like $5,000, which is a lot of money to me. I'm a working class person, and I'm actually unemployed right now. So, been looking for jobs. I just applied for 3 more yesterday. But I've been trying to take a look at the Koberger plea more dispassionately and more logically, because the families are not a party to, it's not like it's the state of Idaho versus Koberger. It's not the Gonzalez's, or they are victims, but they don't get to dictate how the case goes. And I think, unfortunately, for Steve Gonzalez, my heart breaks for him, because I relate to him. I look at the Chapins, and I think they're an amazing family. They are. I couldn't do that. I couldn't be that calm. I couldn't just be that positive and say, okay, I'm going to put my energy into my other 2 children and not look at the anger and loss. Like, I'm the type of person that I would be trying to figure out a way to get into the jail to get vengeance myself. That's my personality. So I don't, try to confuse, like, people on how I feel. That, I would be much more like Steve than much more like the Chapins, although I very much think the Chapins have a very reasonable, logical, loving approach to how they, want their child remembered, and how they want to take care of their family. I think Steve is a lot more like me, a lot more emotional, and I hope that as time goes on, because this is how I look at it in terms of how I think Steve might feel. And this is just a guess, that he's put all of his energy and focus in rage and anger at the person that took his beloved daughter away. And he has put all his energy into making sure that person went to jail for the rest of their life, or got the death penalty, preferably the death penalty for Steve, I believe. And he's been quite public about it. I think that they should have been consulted. They should have been counseled a lot more, given Steve's been very publicly critical along the way. And if this is what was going on behind the scenes, you can see why he's been critical. I did see an interview, and I was shocked. I was gobsmacked to see that Bill Thompson is a prosecutor, and that's an elected position. He's been in that position since the 90s, I believe. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I'm open to being wrong on that, but he's been an elected prosecutor for a very long time. He's not an assistant DA. He is the, elected district attorney And he has pled out every death penalty case. He's taken death off the table and pled these cases out. I've heard of one other case that he did that too. Apparently, he has never taken a death penalty case all the way through trial, through the like the guilty verdict, and then through the penalty phase where they discuss the mitigating, and aggravating things to decide, is it going to be life without parole, LWOP, or death penalty, D10, which is the jury going to do. And first of all, there's no guarantee that they'd find him guilty, although I believe they had a very good case. So I think reasonably you could assume that he'd be found guilty, but there's no way to reasonably assume he'd be given the death penalty. And, I think that one thing that the emotional gut punch that I got when I heard the news, I was shocked. And when I saw it on Twitter, I was upstairs. My husband was cooking, and my mother was in the living room, and I yelled out. I opened the door. I was like, honey, come here. A coworker took a plea. And my mom's like, well, what are you yelling about? And my husband's like, that case. And he's like, he what? And he came like running up the stairs. He's like, are you sure? Where'd you see it? I was like, Twitter. And he's like, I said, no. It's coming from Brian Enton. I think everybody that saw the tweet from Brian Enton had the same reaction. Holy crap. This can't be real. Oh, it's Brian Enton. It has to be real, because he's a fairly reliable reporter. I really like Brian Enton, and I think he's done a really good job. I've been watching him since Gabby Petito. I think he's been all over the world. He was just in the Middle East not too long ago, like a week or two ago. And I know he was in Texas when he did an interview that I saw. He was in his car just about to go on with News Nation, for the flooding down in Texas. But I think with Steve, with this plea, not being given time to just being smacked with it, they didn't sit down with him and explain, like, there's a public safety issue. What if he's not convicted? What if he's acquitted? And I know in Steve's mind that's impossible, but the DA has to consider that. If they can put him away for the rest of his life with no ability to appeal, as a matter of public safety, do you take the risk that he would be acquitted? And do you waste the expense of a death penalty trial when you're not sure that he would be given the death penalty in a county that it is already having to pay to have the trial in another county, so they're having to pay to have him housed somewhere else. They're having to pay for the attorneys to travel 3 hours back and forth. There's a lot of expense that was being incurred by the taxpayers of Moscow. It's a small community, and a lot of it is college students and the school. And obviously the university is not going to be happy about its taxes going up, so that's going to be shifted then to the students, or to, in terms of tuition going up, or to the citizens in Moscow, and there's not a lot of them to divide up that bill. So from a very pragmatic, justice is blind. You can't, my husband doesn't like discipline. We were talking about that because he's like, I just don't like it. I said, you don't like discipline. You don't like disciplining kids. You don't like disciplining yourself. You don't like being, no, and this is the law, and you broke it, and these are the rules, and he always wants an exception. And I'm a very regimented person, so you can imagine when we get into it, like, because we see things very differently, but I appreciate very much that he sees the world differently than me, because he brings something different to my life and to our marriage that's very helpful, because I'm very rigid, and he's not. He's very bendy, and you kind of have to be, especially, this is how I am at almost 50. Me in my 20s, I was like, it is my way or the highway, because I am always right and never wrong. Now, I can admit I am not always right, and I am wrong frequently. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to get new information and say, as I incorporate this new information into my understanding, I think my opinion's going to change a little bit. He and I go back and forth on the death penalty all the time, because he thinks that it's, unless you can prove it, like, unless you have videotape of someone actually committing the crime, and even then, he has a hard time with that. I'm like, you think it's more humane to house these people in a box? And why should we have to pay for it? I'm like, I don't have teeth. Why should they? Like, why am I paying? Why is my tax money going to give them medical needs that when my own medical needs aren't being met. I mean, I get Steve Gonzalez's problem, but I mean, we do have to keep them alive. There is a thing called cruel and unusual punishment. I get the outrage and the anger, but I think pragmatically, legally, from a social standpoint, for the security of the citizens of not just Moscow, but like he was from Pennsylvania and he was going to go back there because he had lost his teaching position, and part of his graduate or his doctoral program was having hours as a student as a teaching assistant. Like that was being a TA was part of the doctoral program. So once he was fired from that position, even if he could pay the tuition, I don't know how he would actually get he might be able to continue to take some classes, but I don't know how he would actually get that doctorate without being able to get a teaching position. And that's not a big community. It's not like here, like I'm in the Metro Detroit area. We've got Wayne State, the University of Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Henry Ford Community College, Wayne County Community College, Washtenaw Community College, and that's only 20 miles away. I mean, there's Concordia. I mean, there's so many schools. I think there's 8 different nursing programs in less than 40 miles of my house. Macomb, Oakland universities and community colleges, because Oakland has a university. There's Oakland University and Oakland Community College. I mean, I'm in an area where there's a ton of schools. So even if like you couldn't get a teaching position at one of the schools and you were in the program, they could probably make a deal with one of the other schools to help get you teaching hours. Like, not because you were fired like Koberger, but just but up there they don't have. That's like being up at Marquette in northern Michigan. Like there's one other school, Michigan Tech, like an hour and a half away, and that's it. There's like nothing else around. So in my mind, I kind of picture Moscow like Marquette up in the UP. That my daughter was accepted. We moved her up there. She couldn't sleep. She had anxiety. She ended up going to the emergency room because she went 2 days without sleeping, had a complete panic attack. I didn't want to pick her up her first night. I was like, just stay the night. And we drove home 8 hours, and I had to take time off work. So it was a good thing I had taken a week off because we took 2 days going up, and then we couldn't get a hotel coming back home. There were literally no hotel rooms in the entire Upper Peninsula of Michigan, none. So we had to drive to Mackinac, come across the bridge from Sault Ste. Marie into Mackinac, and then we stayed in Mackinac, and then in the morning we drove home, got home, and she called us and was like, I'm in the emergency room, and she was only 17, so the hospital called us to get permission to treat her, because up there they have college students that are 17, and obviously the college knows like parents can't come from out of state or 8 hours away to sign an admission form. So they called us, and she was young, and I mean she never drove on any road trip she and I ever went on. Been to Pennsylvania, been to like Philly and Pittsburgh and Nashville. And she doesn't drive on any trips that we've gone on, and yet she drove from Marquette to Grayling, which is about an hour south of Mackinac, maybe 45 minutes, depending on how fast you're driving. But she made it from Marquette all the way through Mackinac and to Grayling. I mean, and that's a drive. Yeah, because I'm trying to think. From Sheboygan to Grayling is... Sheboygan's 45 minutes, Grayling 25. Yeah, so I mean it's a haul, and she drove that. She packed up her entire car by herself because we were thinking we were gonna have to drive up, help her pack up and get out. She packed everything up after unpacking everything and putting everything away. She was in a beautiful brand new dorm. It was so nice. I couldn't believe it. I have video footage of walking in there. I couldn't believe how nice it was. It's like a brand new apartment that you could have a wedding in the foyer, like the study room when you walk in. It's this huge open, looks like a log cabin, but it's like got big windows and beautifully lit, and it's like 2-3 stories high. The ceiling, it was beautiful. I'm like, this is a dorm? Are you kidding me? The dorm that I stayed in, my husband and I had, so I lived in a dorm for one semester my freshman year in 1995, and it was a co-ed by floor because it had community bathrooms. Like you couldn't. I used to wait every Tuesday when I got out of class at 10:30. They cleaned our bathrooms at 11. And so I would get back to my room, and the janitor would be in there. And thank God my bathroom was my dorm room was directly across from the bathroom. So I could walk out of my door and walk right, key right into the bathroom. So I would see the janitor in there because they'd have the cart in when they were cleaning. And I mean, it was a huge, like a locker room. It's a big bathroom. There's probably 15 shower stalls. There's one bathtub, and it's got a wooden door that locks. So it's like, it's not a curtain, you can actually go in there, lock the door, sit, soak, you shave your legs, I hated shaving my legs in the shower as a swimmer, and I get razor burn, at least I did, because I have really coarse hair. But anyway, I'd be able to sit down. So I would literally wait for them to clean the bathroom. I knew, like, I'd see them in there when I get back from class. I'd change, and I would get out of my clothes. And then as soon as they would walk out, I would go running with my shampoo and conditioner bucket into the bathroom the second they got out. So I had a perfectly clean bathtub to sit and shower in. College could have been fun under different circumstances. I didn't have a good time, but the dorm room was so old. So when I saw my daughters, I couldn't believe it. But that is when I think of Moscow, I think kind of Marquette, a small community, and the cost of that trial was going to be obnoxious on the taxpayers. So I think that, dispassionately looking at it, they absolutely made the right decision. I think they went about it in absolutely the wrong way. I think they should have absolutely talked to the families. I think that it would not have hurt them to wait till Wednesday to announce it and do the hearing on Friday. And I'm sure that this was done quickly because the attorneys have other matters and the court has other things to attend to, and they had to schedule these hearings in between other cases. I get that. I think that the right thing was done in the wrong way, and I guess I will leave it there. So thank you for watching. I've been trying to make some longer content, so that's kind of my thoughts on this case. My heart breaks for all of the families. I hope Steve Gonzalez is able to focus his attention in a positive direction, like the way the Petito family did. It started the Gabby Petito Foundation, and they kind of have moved forward doing good work in her name. Hopefully Steve can find something like that. And all my thoughts and prayers are with the victims that survived and have to live with the loss that they've suffered. It's terrible. And I think, like I said, I think that him being in prison for the rest of his life and not being able to appeal and drag these families through hell for decades to come, they're going to write books, there's going to be movies. He's unfortunately going to be studied, and they're not going to ever really be able to escape his name coming up. But hopefully it'll fade in time, and hopefully they will get some peace. Because they'll never get peace. Never again. So, anyway, please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you in another video. Bye.